economy is cyclic, real estate is cyclic. So this is something else we need to crack. We're seeing a little bit of cracking in the system over here with the banking failure, but I think a lot more still yet to come. And there are going to be some great opportunities moving forward. And it's actually intuitive to be thinking about this, getting your investor actually ready to invest.
Tim is one of the most authentic and genuine people I've ever met.
Sincerely believe he's coming from a position of giving, and that means a lot.
You're going to make huge progress.
Welcome everybody to today's Capital Raising Show. I'm your host, Tim Mai. And today I have an amazing guest on the line with us. You know, a lot of people we interview are male because this is a very male dominant industry. And I'm honored to have an awesome female expert capital raiser here on the line with us today, Elisa Zhang. Elisa has been in real estate investing for 13 years now, since 2009, and just 10 years into the business, she became financially free. And since then, she has built a portfolio of $650 million in holdings across 2,700 units of multifamily within Texas, Arizona, and Washington state through her company Amplitude Equity. And she has raised over $20 million for those deals. And she is passionate about helping others who are in W-2, full-time job to 9-to-5ers to achieve financial independence, like she did through her education content and programs at Easy Financial Independence University. Let's give Elisa a big welcome, y'all.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, Elisa, if we can start, if you can share with everybody a little bit about yourself and give us an introduction of how and why you got into real estate investing to begin with.
Yeah, definitely. So I am an IT background. So I worked at the one of the Fortune 500 companies. So when I basically graduated from the university, so like many of people who is probably on the call here, I think engineers, being grown up Asian, like you're pretty much your engineer, doctor, or lawyer. Otherwise, you're probably the misfits, probably your parents. So basically, kind of following the same path over there, moved to Seattle in 2006. So in 2009, we all know what happened in 2008. So in 2009 is when we actually got into the business. So on the last kind of downshift cycle. Really to kind of ease into the investment, we really started with, because not knowing any options that's out there, it's great today. There's a lot of social medias that allow you to get more educations or get exposed to different vehicles of investment. Back then, there isn't such a thing. So we started with just buying single family homes, started with owning just one unit of a condo, get it rented out, and then so on and so forth. So just kind of start accumulating while I have a W-2 job. And, when my daughter was born in 2015, really kind of shifted gear for me. I think a lot of us who have kids or wanted that flexibility of spending time with your loved ones, it really kind of hit home for me. I was commuting longer than I was actually spending the time with my kid. So something has to kind of change. So also during maternity leaves, there's a lot of time that you get to think about things aside from catching up asleep. We basically I start researching and read into bigger pockets and then start reading all I could, actually socializing on bigger pockets as well as a platform. Met some of my current partners actually. And that, our path kind of just like weaved in between, and eventually we're like, okay, we should probably just do deals together. So from there, I learned all about cash flow and then so on and so forth. So switched gear into multifamily, getting into small fourplexes to start with. Again, taking other people's money wasn't like even in the books for us. And we just bought stuff using savings, right? Nothing really sexy over there. And then bought fourplexes, operated these. And then the people start talking to me at work and they're like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Other people are like, oh, we're taking the trips. And so I'm like, oh yeah, I'm working on my fourplex, working on the toilets, working on the, whatever. Nothing is like really fun. Filling up the tenants, like whatever. So one thing lead to the other. Some of my coworkers start to say, oh, like you've been doing this thing for a little bit. Like we want to kind of maybe put some money together with you. Would you take our investment? Right. So I'm like, I'm not ready yet. So then we got into small commercial multifamily, which is more than 4 units. And then from there, I took on a partner at work because he's really persistent asking me about every single week. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's do a deal together. I will put you as a small ownerships on this. And then ever since then, the first investment that he has made with us has been like 7 times itself
Wow.
within like a little bit over 4 years.
Wow.
Of course, Mark was kind as well.
Yep.
So that kind of leads to the other. So there's a lot of referrals. He's waited on his referral, but like, words kind of got out, so on and so forth. At the same time, I also, in 2017 is when I decided to make a leap into syndication and start educate myself into syndication. And because the drive over that, it was because the deals are starting running dry. So we wanted to start investing outside of our backyard into a different state. And then we were told that we should have 100 unit or more. And so we don't have capital for all that stuff. So that's where the syndication kind of comes in. And, we joined a couple of different groups, got myself a couple of different mentors, not just one, but a couple. I study CCIM courses as well online just to kind of get into a sponge mode to learn a new mode. So from there, we decided to invest it in Dallas to start with, and then it's not in our backyard. So at first we felt a little timid to be the boots on the ground asset managers. So we partnered with a couple of different operators in Dallas that introduced us through network groups, very similar to this. And we kind of just overseeing the capital side of stack. We created a whole system with investor relations, and we also set up like all that softwares and so on and so forth for our partners, and then develop a strategy to raise money together and so on and so forth. So that's kind of our first venture into syndication deals. And then we got into our Phoenix market due to one reason or the other. Our partnerships didn't quite work out the way that we were hoping. So we had to do some asset management as well on our asset in Phoenix, which leads to us believing, like really shatter the limited belief that we have that we couldn't remote manage properties. I still wouldn't say like we're remote managing the property, but I think as an asset manager, there's a lot of tasks that you could do remotely. And if you're the main sponsor, then you should visit the sites pretty frequent as well for that. So leveraging our PM relationships and partners that we're able to kind of run our portfolio far. So we have now properties in Phoenix, properties in still property in Dallas, and also Houston and San Antonio. So that kind of leads us to where we are today. So I think, every time there's a limited belief being shattered, that you kind of moved up one ladder or so on and so forth. So all challengers are, they're challenges, but they help you kind of grow to the next stage where you need to go.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, great story for sure. Can you share with us about your business model? Do you do mostly co-GPs and you help capital raise, or do you also do asset management? Do you also help source deals? Like, how much of that spectrum do you focus in on?
Yeah, so we do everything currently. I would say now we're kind of more so focused on just having our own company, managing the asset right now. So we are the main sponsor today, but as I mentioned before, when we first started, we were kind of just being a part of the player, being a co-GP, looking at a certain stack of the operation, as well as specifically focused on the investor relations side of things. So from there, we kind of transition it into a full-fledged sponsor in terms of running our own deals and managing other people. That's in the deal as well. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Even dabbled in property management, and we quickly decided that's not the path that we're going after.
Yes. Why is that?
Well, I think it's all depends on situation. I still think a long term it's a good strategy to have self-manage the team. Just because the response rates are going to be a lot faster. But that being said, if you have a very good strategic partners in the property management side that you trust, that could work out pretty well. We obviously also learned from, our past mistakes too. I think at every stage, your partner, there's a different level of partner that you're seeking. So the people that you worked with before may not work with into the next stage. So recognizing that and swapping that out is really crucial. Why do we not decided to go after property management? I think when everything is all happening at the same time, opening a new property management company, which I have a part of for, two of my partners as well. I've seen them kind of do that too, also helping along the side. That's going to be a year to a year and a half effort to just build everything from the ground up. That's definitely the long path and painful path. I think there's a much faster path, such as acquisition mergers, and also just there's nothing wrong finding a strategic partner over there, right? So I would encourage to say, our portfolio size is definitely coming to a point where you can contemplate it, but the amount of work and the timing really matters in terms of, when you start that venture. For us, it was just not the right timing. We went after for about 2 months and we realized, hey, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the back office that we have to set up. And we're just not at the time with the interest rate changing, et cetera. We're just not right at the right time to take on that venture. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. In terms of the capital raising side, do you actively out there marketing for passive investors, or has most of your capital raising been more referral based?
Yeah, so we are pretty active in marketing in terms of like a YouTube. We're planning on doing courses, and we do blogs and we do newsletters, but a lot is based on referral basis as well, just through peer track records that's able to kind of help us turn around. And then I really believe in deep relationship building instead of massive marketing, which is also an area that we're maybe not so great at it, massive marketing. We haven't cracked that, whole entire game yet. But I would say relationship building, long-term relationship building leading to referral is a main method that we use over here. Because one of my investor has, for example, referred us to more than 15 his friends, right? So that's a big deal. And then some of our investors that has been along the way for us for a couple years, we also try to look for ways for their people, friends and family to be able to invest into that too. So kind of the network just grew from referrals mostly.
I
And
see.
then, our investor may also participate in different capacity, because they have their desire to also kind of following similar step that I took, right? So we kind of mentor them in turn in terms of like, hey, how do you actually work with your investors to work on these things? So on and so forth. So that kind of giving forward with the value add to your investor, not just in the returns perspective, really helped with growing the network. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, let me make sure I'm clear here. So you take your passive investors, typically, they have a 9-to-5 job. You teach them about passive investing, they invest in your deals, and then you also teach them to eventually become an active syndicator themselves. Is that correct?
Yeah, potentially, because they will ask us like, how do you market this stuff? Like, how do you, like at the procedure? Like, because remember, like we came up with the whole raising like a whole system, for our partners and so on and so forth. We use it ourselves, of course. So there's different kind of gauge. What do you do with this? Or how do you do the funnels and so on and so forth? So yes, we kind of help them with that as well. And then
Gotcha.
they probably not going to raise, like they don't necessarily all raise for us, that they raise for other things. And we also help them kind of thinking through, like one of my investor reached out to me, was talking about he was doing lend deals, and he was talking about lend deals, and he's like, hey, what do I do with a lend deal? Like, we're not operating in lends. But I looked at it, I was like, well, have you thought about a blended fund? So that's an interesting perspective. Yeah, I enjoy having these conversations from people. And then later on they're like, oh, we're successful doing this, but we have other friends and family that we wanted them to invest with you as well, so here's the referrals, right? So it's all very organic. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I'd love to hear more about this funnel that you're talking about. So yeah, what does your capital raising funnel looks like? What are the steps within that funnel?
Yeah, so I think it has multiple different kind of entry point. I'm not marketing major. I know, Tim, you are, so you probably have a better word for these, but it's essentially your first touch, right? And that could come from anywhere. It could be coming from conferences that you sponsor speaking, or even like this event, so on and so forth. And then so on your first touch points over there, it could be newsletter, someone forward to someone else, right? Whatever it is. And then so because we've been kind of doing business mostly through referrals, the 506B, so we kind of have a little bit of disadvantage over here that we don't advertise our deal, we don't advertise our syndication side of the business, right? So you have to kind of almost create a different thing here that you're giving people value to, that is an entire different business. And so for us, it was education, because education is a fast foremost, that's something that I'm really passionate about. So we give out these free articles, free ebooks, and so on and so forth, but we also go to conference speaks and so on and so forth. So after first touch point, you would have needed to kind of have some sort of CRM system in your background. This CRM system doesn't have to be very complicated. If you're only targeting 100 people to keep in track of, I wouldn't recommend to invest in a CRM system. But you could simply as having a spreadsheet, like I was running for 3 years with no CRM system, literally just a spreadsheet, like, kind of like the Rolodex, right? So, and then what's important is you need to have people's email, you need to have people's phone number. And then really on your initial interaction with the folks, you will want to get them to, depends on the volume. So, but at where we at now, we're kind of getting that into the next level of funnel, which is schedule a call with us, right? So they're already on so add them to the newsletter. They receive our newsletter, touch points. And then at some point around the time, we're going to try to push for scheduling a call. Every once in a while, we'll run a campaign on like scheduling a call. But most time it's just kind of sits in the background. It's a newsletter. We give people value to start with. And then we also get sources from YouTube and so on and so forth, whatever. So after you have the call, that's where it centralizes everything. And then we'll call what we call to qualify our investors. And if they are investors that are ready to invest right now, then do we have something that's going to be coming down the pipeline at some point where we can kind of retouch base with? But for us, it's really important because most of our deals are through 506B and it's friends and family. We do not advertisement. We take the security law very seriously. If you're just first talking with us, we're not going to be sending you the deal. Like we will have to have at least 3 to 7 touch points before like actual talking. We get to know you for you to be actually in our funnel. Referral kind of bypasses through all this because referrals are already someone's friends and family. Usually it's very close. So we usually have a call and have a couple follow-ups, again, multiple calls, and we know the people very well. Oftentimes this happened too is one of my investors, they will organize a whole dinner. Like, so we go to the dinner and then you talk to all 10 people, like you spend 3 hours together, you kind of know each other very well. And then we still have follow-ups after that. So when we have a deal, then there's a whole system on like, how do we, post the deals, how do we write the pitch, how do we create the decks and so on and so forth. So going through all that, and there's a whole follow-up system actually closing the deal as well. So that's very high level what that kind of look like. And I think if you just first started, you're going to have to find your niche on what is the best, like your way of raising money. I don't believe in, because, I think it's really easy to sell a course on creating a system, or it's really easy to sell a course to say, create a funnel, because that's something that feels tangible and very technical. So, you could build a whole funnel and then realize you're like, where do I find investors, right? So I think the most important thing I always encourage people to say is just go out there, talk to people, ask the question, like, would you be interested in an investment like this in the future? Asking the qualifying question, and then hypothetically speaking, right? And then also just from there, then you kind of segregate the audience over there. Like, look, like my first couple years of raising money, I don't even have a CRM system, like, and I'm terrible at organization. Even the Excel sheet, it was like disorganized, right? So it's literally just a phone book, and just getting out there and talking to people. So some folks are really good at sales, and some people are really good at marketing. You just have to kind of understand which bucket are you in, and then use your strength to that advantage. Yeah,
that's awesome. Let's talk about that.
And don't kill yourself on stuff that you're not good at, right? Like we're not super good with marketing. We have to like learn and grow from there for sure. But if you're not good at marketing, like how about talking to your friends? Like make a list of 20 people that you
Right.
know of and start talking with these folks. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, about the sales aspect of it. So when you first started raising money, were you already good with, talking to people on the phone and, um, getting them to take an action, or was that something you kind of learned along the way?
So I'm not coming from the sales background. I think if you have a sales job, the bridge over is definitely easier. And if you're a successful salesperson, you've already kind of got your base over there. I was an engineer, so but I was, doing product management, so I do have to talk to people, and get people to kind of logically put stuff together. So I think that's kind of like a little bit of up, coming from my background. But it's literally just kind of small talk. You're showing people like the track record, and you're showing them what you are doing, because I also passively invested as well. So it's kind of showing them like, hey, this is how I passive invest. This is the process that I have when I passive invested. This is how I evaluate a deal. We can underwrite some deals together, and so on and so forth. So I'm definitely not shy. I'm probably an extrovert introvert. Like if I'm in a party for too long, then I need to like be in my room for a little bit, but otherwise I'm good. Like I can, keep going. So definitely that helps. But if you're introvert, then you may want to focus on marketing, right? Having the written form to be your spokesperson. But at some point you have to talk to people. Otherwise you shouldn't be in this business. You should be in operations. You should probably find a partner that's kind of doing this business instead. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. In in terms of talking to people, do you try to get as many, like you have your first touch point of getting them into your newsletters? Do you try to get as many of those people on the phone as possible? Like that part of
Yeah.
your process?
Yeah. Yeah, that is, and it's always a competing order. So like any sales people in this call, you're probably better than me because I'm just a part-time salesperson, right? And so that salespeople is all about the ratio of closing and how many phone calls you're making. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the funnel number, right? Like it's like lead gen to the phone call and to the conversion. These are the numbers, and then you just have to get on the call, but making sure you have a standard script that would be really helpful because it helps you efficientize your time. So a call can have 1 hour call. You can shorten them in 30 minutes to shorten them 15 minutes. I'm always impressed with people's like screening calls and like how efficient they can become. So these are layers that you can add later. It really depends on the volume. The bigger volume you have, there's more screening that you have to have. Like right now, I'm also doing operations, pretty hands on with that. So I have someone actually helps me doing this equity funneling, talking with the investor piece, because there's other pens in the oven, that's kind of pens on the fire or something like that, right? So that I have to take care of. But if you're just doing this, realizing that you're a marketing company, you're marketing to sales, and then the whole goal is to keep in touch with people who are your asset, like your investors, your asset in your database, and making sure that every time you talk to them, you're adding some sort of value to them. So yes, so definitely you want to have a cost script, and then it's about numbers game. So when I was kind of doing mostly all on equity side of things, I'll literally just block my day and talk to 6 to 8 investors a day. And then a lot of topics are rinse and repeat, and that's actually how it leads to our website, these topics that we come up on the website, because I got tired after every single call, like talk to them about the same thing, right? So I'm like, I'm just gonna write an article about this and then put it on the website, and then now we can skip that. We just had to have 5 minutes call instead of the detail, and then I tell them like as a follow-up, because you need to do a follow-up. Follow-up is really important. I think statistics has showed that if you follow up within an hour, your closing ratio is dramatically improved. If you follow it in a day, it kind of falls off a lot more. If you follow up in like a couple of days, that it's kind of like, okay, you may lost the lead, right? So the follow-up is really important. You can automate it in your CRM system as well. For us, these articles becomes kind of landing spot where they can research more. So it's like, hey, we talked about that 401k account stuff, and here's a article that we wrote about it that has examples and all that stuff in there, which is much more because people want to see something, instead of just talking about it. A lot of feedbacks I got from people was like, after talking with you, my head is spinning, right? So it's like, okay, like how do we actually get it not to spin, and then back to like understanding the concept. Yeah.
Right. That's really good. Is there, do you intentionally, since a lot of your deals are 506B where you have to have that relationship with them, do you use that as a sort of like as a hook to say, hey, this is why it's important that you book a call with us, because we can't show you deals. We can only show deals to our inner circle who have talked to us before. And like, do you use that kind of
we don't
messaging?
look, we actually rather be able to publicly blast it and talk to people about it, but we do feel like there's a importance on who your investors are, because who your investor are really matters and reflect of who you are. So we like people who really value long-term relationships. A lot of our investor are repeat investors because they value that aligned, right? So it's a both bi-directional selection process. So we do feel like the benefits of that 506B having the extra call to do, but we don't use it as a hook because remember, you can't really advertise your deal to start with, right? You can't really advertise that you're doing syndication to start with. Otherwise, it would be like conditioning your investor.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so we only kind of talk about education type of thing. We take it pretty seriously. I know other colleagues may not take it as much, but we'd
Right.
rather be on the safer side. And then truly for us, building that relationship is what's part of rewarding for me. Because for me, there's certain people who likes, my husband, who's extrovert, likes to just go out there, talk to anyone that would talk back to him, and he would shoot stories and so on and so forth. For me, it's a much more selective process. Like I wanted to actually build that relationship so that long-term building relationship, I'm still an extrovert, that really kind of it's rewarding. So knowing that I help people that really matters to me is like a process. So then the 506B is rather just like an excuse in terms of like doing that whole selection process, right? Because
Right.
we could have gone 506C and we are likely going to go 506C at some point, but we still want to carve out that core group to be the 506B, so that we know our investor very well. Mhm.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you have data on, like, on average, how long once someone enters into your world, the first touch to when they invest with you? Do you happen to have a rough idea of how long that period is?
Yeah, it really varies. I would say it's anywhere from like, like a very warm introduction, like so on, so is so's like college friend, and the person invested in my deal was a college friend. Like, it's a very like a close relationship. Then that can go as quickly as like 60 days because you literally in 60 days, like you met each other 10 times, right? Like that's like a substantial, I know their kids, like all that stuff, to, a year time spent. But if it's over a year, likely that lead is not going to ever convert. So that's going to go on to a deferral list. And there are people who are still on my list for like 3 years, right? At some point they come back and they wake up from, whatever that they have to process through. And they're like, you know what, I'm ready now because I did a bad deal on myself actively. I'm ready to do some passive stuff or ready to take like people's life change. You never know. And then I have colleagues that comes back to me after 5 to 6 years. These are just friends, family. Literally they're like, okay, my life had changed and now I want to invest it in real estate, and then I'm totally passive, I don't want to do anything else, like let's kind of reconnect over there. So you never know. I think one thing I realized is on social media, like you do all this posts, because when we first doing this with VAs, they're just posting, I'm like, I'm not seeing any returns, there's no reactions, like so on and so forth. They're like, yeah, but if you do an investment, just simply being seen is important, because you never know at the right moment it struck someone and it just kind of clicks and they're like, oh yeah, I should talk to Elisa, so I would say averagely around that, but like over a year is probably over the span, like that person is probably just on a warmer, like we don't invest too much into that. And then I think 3 months to 6 months usually is like the hot spot, where we see the majority of the investors.
Right.
like brand new investors that we know.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because that allows relationships to be built during that period of time and enough trust to be established.
Right. That's good. Do you have a strategy at all to go after the people who they like you, they like what you're doing, but for whatever reason they're just, not ready to invest or not qualified to invest, and then turning them into a referral of someone else who would invest with you?
We don't have an active strategy with that, but I think in some ways it can be harvested on more. If you have a regular course that you're advertising for your course for, that's probably a really hot place for people who are not ready to invest because simply they're not at the accredited status or so on and so forth. They're just not there, right? Or they're cash and they need to get their house in place before they do anything. So they're there for the knowledge. And I think actually that's the best way because you can kind of help these people along the way to really learn about what is passive investment because there are risks involved in alternative investment. For that reason, I think it's really good to have some sort of, material to help your investor to be more educated because you want a more sophisticated investor. We don't want investors that just like, oh, I'm going to put some money over here. I expect a return. And it's like, if you're like just off 1%, it's like, what's going on, right? Like you don't want that type of investor, or at least we don't. Some other people maybe. But so for us, that quality of investor is really important. So educating them on like, what are the right questions to ask? What should they be underwriting? Because taking responsibility of their own money to evaluate the sponsors and the deals and so on. So, because at the end of the day, it's their investment. They got to be responsible for their investment, their decisions, right? So that's important. So we feel that education is really important. So that piece, perhaps in a very unintentional way, is keeping people very warm in terms of their educations from there, like the content itself. Yeah.
I see. Okay. In terms of, we want to circle back to marketing. What channels of marketing have you found to be your favorite that worked really well for you?
When you find one, let me know. We started doing some YouTube stuff. I think YouTube has a whole different strategy over there. That's one of my favorite because I feel like that's second closest to getting the words directly from horse's mouth, essentially, right? So like I like YouTube, but YouTube also has a lot of noise, content creators. It's really hard to kind of edge out there. For us, that was one. We did do a podcast that was kind of like mixed return. I think every channel has its right time for entrance. For us, the best one is still our newsletter and our articles and blogs. And I would say social media wise, LinkedIn is probably the best for us because it's relevant. It's already kind of selected in a way. When I first started, Facebook is probably the only channel. I found person-to-person interactions to be really good. So I would say our biggest funnel not to forget is actually conferences and local meetups. So because you actually see people face to face, I did a little bit more statistic around here. I think just from Internet of Things, the conversion rates are much lower if we actually met people face to face. Through a conference, local meetups, providing these content, very old school way. And then from there, then you can start build a base because the referrals, these are coming from like more the online or just referral themselves. So then there, you don't necessarily need to be a face-to-face interaction. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But I think our core member was all built, our first layer of investors all built from face-to-face interactions.
I see. Okay. You mentioned, articles, newsletter, blogs, as among the top there. How do those articles get traffic? Is it SEO? Do you actively promote them on LinkedIn? Like, how do people find them?
Yeah, we do social media promotions by cross-link and posting on social medias. And then so everything kind of points to the website. Even if we're doing like YouTube, we'll say, you kind of have a little bait to say like, oh, like go to here, find more information. Like, if we did like a video about 401k account or why you shouldn't invest, like why is 401k account a total scam in the American system, right? Like we'll point it back to our website. So it's a landing place for everything. SEO, we just start doing some, so I don't have results for that, but I think SEO and paid advertisements are areas to explore. For like YouTube, for example, we see a big lift when we start running some ads on that, and then paid
Oh,
advertisement. Yeah.
okay. So you run ads to your YouTube channel?
We started to run a little bit, very small budget, just to try
Gotcha.
to see, and then that definitely have a lift in terms of the
Oh,
number of subscriber.
that's
But we
good.
also have, like most of us, if you look up our channel, it's like less than 1,000 people, right? So it's like, is it that successful? Not sure, and then it's a very labor intensive doing the YouTube.
Yeah, lots. It's competing on YouTube these days, with editing is tough. Yeah,
Right.
they're doing such
Yeah.
a great job with editing. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. And do you have a fund or do you only do syndications?
Currently we only do syndication. We have been contemplating on creating a fund for various different purposes because it allows our investor to diversify more. The thing about fund versus syndication is that we have a current investor database. They're used to a deal by deal cases. So switching them
Mm,
into a fund, there's a transition. But if you're just starting, then I think you can do the fund. It does give your investor more diversification. So we constantly are evolving our products based off what our investor needs are and what their, appetites are. I think now it's probably a good time to starting doing more diversification. And so fund allowed them to potentially diversify with a lower minimal. So that's the reason why we're kind of start exploring that. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Now, you got started right after the market crash in 2009, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, and you've been able to ride that wave up. Where do you see the market is going now? Do you see any similarity? What are the differences that you see between the market that we're seeing now versus what you went through when you first started?
It's probably very similar. And obviously we kind of started investing in the later cycle of the correction,
Right.
right? But also we're very novice, keep in mind, we're not very in tune with the capital markets, so on and so forth. So looking back over there, but it feels very similar. I wasn't one of these people who hold mortgages when the market crashed, right? So that piece of information, I don't have the comparison. I know what
Yeah.
I'm going through right now in terms of the things that you have to navigate. But with, it's very similar. And I think, economy is cyclic, real estate is cyclic. So this is, something else would need to crack. Like we're kind of seeing a little bit of cracking in the system over here with the banking failure, but I think a lot more still yet to come. And there are going to be some great opportunities moving forward. And it's actually counterintuitive to be thinking about this, getting your investor actually ready to invest. Meanwhile, they're invested in some deals that you bought maybe at the height of the market, right? So having that discussion and really helping them thinking through this and
Right.
understanding that investing in the future, like future deals, is actually a countermeasure to what you already invested. These are, to some point, we can have these very sophisticated discussion with our investor because the relationships that we have built up so far. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then I know you said, you have properties in Texas. I'm here in Houston, Texas. I know like our insurance have increased a lot. Property taxes have increased a lot. That's those are the two major factors when it
Yeah.
comes to Texas. Are how, I guess, are you dealing with those challenges and how are you
Mhm.
navigating through them?
Yeah, so I would say it's pretty tough to navigate through them for sure. And you kind of have to do a prep talk to yourself every day, getting up to do it and do it again. So I would say our Texas properties are overall pretty stable over there. We are seeing an increase in insurance, but in the great Texas over here, there's also a whole industry created on contesting,
Yep.
the taxes and so on and so forth. So it's kind of like, oh, it got raised up and you do the contesting and it gets back to where it needs to be. So not to worry about that piece. And the insurance has gone up. So with a larger portfolio, we're able to start looking at portfolio-wide insurance and see if we can be on a group
Mm,
policy. So these are some ways to kind of combat it. Also, payroll is the biggest thing that people don't talk about. Payroll has really gone up, 20, 30, even 40%, right? So that's actually really difficult to kind of manage through.
mm,
And I think some parts of it too is we have to talk to investors and be realistic about to say, hey, maybe it's time to kind of adjust to your investment return expectation. We always try to under promise, over deliver. So on the under promising part, we have always talked about 5 to 7 year hold. And we go back to
mhm.
our investors, like, remember the 5 to 7 year hold? Like, yes, we've been enjoying like 2, 3 years exit last year, last cycle, like 2 years exit as average. But this is the reason why we told you not to count on it. That brings some repeat. So our projections are always at 5 to 7 years on the higher horizon. So they're like, yep, we understand it. And if you have sophisticated investor, they should understand that, which is the reason why I really truly believe investing in educating your investor up in the front is super
Right.
important, even though it goes slower, because I think the world's all about get the stuff quick, get the stuff now. But I think that there's definitely value in terms of investing in long relationships and then set people
Right.
up for success. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's definitely spot on. Yeah, being in communication and set expectations and yeah, all of those really good. Have you been raising money like recently in the last say 12 months? How has that been? What challenges are you seeing and what's the sentiment of the investors in the last 12 months?
Yeah, we have raised money in the last 12 months, probably more towards the like 6 months ago. So we did close a couple deals there too, but towards the end of year last year, starting like June, July, things start
Mhm.
to like really slow down. I would say we haven't really purchased anything this year, just kind of looking at our current portfolios and focusing on operation is what our focus right now are on, but we are kind of gearing up for another cycle of purchasing because like I mentioned before, there's going to be some great buying opportunities, price are corrected and so on and so forth. So, it's a kind of long-term strategy where we need to execute on that. So I would say not really. I think the investor, like the equity market certainly has cooled down. And I think your investor target perhaps also change and pivots as well because the world's kind of get really uneven over here. A lot of people who does have money are typically like the institutionals and so on and so forth, and they have loads of money that are just sitting on the side looking for deals. So there's still a need for a deal and the money to make a deal together. But I think a lot more certain funds are coming from more the institutional.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some of your favorite tools or resources?
Tools as resources in terms of, can you frame it for me?
Yeah, yeah. So like around, especially around capital raising, but it could also be around the syndication business itself.
Yeah, so I mean, like the CRM system definitely is something that I think everyone should probably invest in. When we
Which one
first
did you
started,
use?
well, when we first started, we used the free one, which is MailChimp, but like that's a very, like a poor man version. And then we upgraded to Active Campaign. We like Active Campaign. I also explored like, was it Podio and then also Pipe Drive.
Yeah, Pipe
Um,
Drive.
yeah, I couldn't quite set them up properly because again, I'm not a marketing guru or so on and so forth. The active campaign seems to be easy enough. There's a lot of stuff that you can create over there. But if you're just like me, like a dummy on the marketing, you'll be like, yeah, I just want to meat and potato stuff. That works as well. So I like active campaign. Just I like keep it simple, just like a one thing that take care of all the stuff. On course wise, when we make courses, we like to use Kajabi. I think there's another software, I can't remember which one it is, a learn world or something. I think that's like something that we're switching to right now because it gives you a little bit more flexibility on creating the courses and so on and so forth. Aside from that, I think these are kind of pretty rudimentary items. Our company runs everything on the cloud, so we're on Google Drives and so on and so forth. I've definitely used a lot of software on Syndication Pro with the experience of helping my partner, myself, setting up a new instances, so I have experience with IMS, Juniper Square, Syndication Pro. I haven't really found the ideal syndication tool, to be honest,
Gotcha.
among all of them. They all have its own pros and cons. So we currently use Syndication Pro, but there's definitely a lot of bugs in that to deal with, sometimes a little frustrating. So we also do a lot of marketing research. So on that side of the house, like Yardi Matrix is definitely one that we recommend subscribing. And if you have a really good friend, they may give you a co-start report, but overall we feel like either Yardi or co-start, we just feel like as asset managers, so we found Yardi to be better, more useful versus co-start. Co-start is really useful for acquisition. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. If you can go back, restart your real estate investing career all over again, anything you would do differently?
I think at any period of your time, you only know what you know. So I think with today's view going back, I would say maybe I would start this journey sooner and then do more passive investment because it's kind of nice to be a passive investor, and I still passive invest today, to be sitting on the calls and just, you get to pick people apart. I don't do that. If I'm a passive investor, I'm super passive, like you can't even find me. But some investors do, they get a little bit active on that. So it's kind of nice where you have no duties and responsibilities. So I would say start doing that sooner, whether it's used for paving the way, just learning the same thing, right? And you can kind of skip the small stuff if you're not meant to be an operator. So that's a lot of headaches. I was just kind of reviewing one our fourplex that we're putting on sale right now. I looked through all the numbers. I'm like, oh, I thought I'm making all these cash flows like all these times, but I'm looking at the whole statement. I'm like, actually, no, there's a lot of money that we spent on the plumbing. So, that's the stuff that you have to deal with as active investors, right? So,
right. That's awesome. Well, Elisa, it's been really an honor to interview you today. For the folks listening, wants to connect with you, learn from you, invest with you, partner with you, where would you like to send them?
So I want to just say, we really appreciate all your support, right? And I think investment is kind of like a syndication is a team sport. So I think, giving value to each other is the most important. And then during time like this is when you find out who really got your back. And I think that's important. And I think building a long-term relationship, specifically addressing these issues. These were byproducts of us building the long-term relationships. And I think, real estate is cyclic. So I think we're very excited for additional buying opportunities that's around the corner. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So where can they find you? Where can they connect with you?
Oh, sorry. So you guys can find me on www.amplitudeequity.com. This is our website. You can kind of look up who we are. Also, actually, better place to connect it would be easyfiuniversity.com. And that's our education site, easy, just spelled out, my last name, first name, easyfiuniversity.com.
All right.
And then we're available on LinkedIn, all the other social medias, LinkedIn, and Instagram, YouTube.
Awesome.
You can do me a favor and go hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. That would be fantastic. Help me get to 1,000 subscribers.
I was,
it's very little.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was just gonna ask, just thank you for being so generous with all the knowledge and wisdom that you share today, and how can the audience give back to you? And so you just said it, so it's perfect. So everyone, in the chat, click on the link to go on Elisa's YouTube channel and subscribe right now while we're on the call. Subscribe right now. While we're on here, we're gonna wrap up this part of the interview, and then we're gonna go into Q&A section here. So Elisa, again, thank you so much for doing this interview with me today.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Awesome.